So, any questions on yesterday's session? So, we discussed what is the fusion applications and cloud computing, on-premise and cloud, and what are the different deployment models we have when we go with the cloud, and fusion architecture related few points we discussed. Any questions on yesterday's session, please? So, based on yesterday's discussion, if you have any queries or any clarification required, please let me know. We can discuss. If no questions, we can start with the today's session. Okay, fine. Seems to no questions. So for today, this is going to be our agenda. We'll talk on Fusion enterprise structure and Fusion security and Fusion users. Okay, we'll try to understand required information before we go and deal with these areas within the system environment. Fine. The first point is Fusion enterprise structure. So before we talk about Fusion enterprise structure, we'll see what is the multi-org structure in EBS. I'm just going with the release 12. In case of EBS, again we call as 11i, we call as setup books and all. So we on the top level you can see business group, right? Which we call as BZ. Under BZ we can have primary ledger, PL, under primary ledger legal entities, the legal entities operating units. Under operating units we can find inventory organization, IO. So this is how we have a multi-org structure. On the top level we'll have a BZ, under BZ primary ledger, under primary ledgers LEs, under LEs OUs, under OUs inventory organization. Similar to this multi-org structure, how that hierarchy we have in Fusion application. The Fusion, whatever the structure we have, that just we call as enterprise structure. Okay, or else you can call Fusion enterprise structure. This is the EBS multi-org. So when you talk about Fusion enterprise structure, how the hierarchy we have, the top level in multi-org in EBS, in the top level you can see business group. The same way here in Fusion, the top level we can see enterprise. Under enterprise we have a divisions. Okay, on the divisions we have a primary ledger concept. Under primary ledger legal entity, under legal entities business units, under business units inventory organization. Okay, so this is a Fusion enterprise structure. Okay, in the Fusion this is how the enterprise structure is designed. On the top level we see enterprise, under enterprise divisions, under divisions, okay, primary ledger, under primary ledger legal entity, under legal entity business unit, under business unit inventory operations. We know depending on the requirement we can have one or multiple. That's purely how the client is running the business, how they are maintaining the data and data security. and transaction controls and the countries and many things will be part of that in terms of taking the decision of how many these units we require in the specific client. So in case of EBS, when you talk about business group, we can create one or multiple business groups that purely depending on the client requirement. Okay, you may create for each country one separate business group, or else for multiple countries also you can create one business group. That's how you can have a solution to manage your employees information primarily. And the when I talk about fusion, so enterprise you can create only one for one instance. So in EBS you can create a number of business groups, but in the fusion applications you can create only one enterprise for one instance. So whatever the instance we get from Oracle for implementation, in that instance you can create only one enterprise. Okay, if one, I mean, say like if you are going to implement for one country, okay, so in that case in EBS you'll create a one business group. But in Fusion it can be one country or multiple countries. Enterprise is going to be same. So what Oracle it is, they are not giving the country specific solution at enterprise level. Within the enterprise, okay, we have a legislative data groups concept which is specific to country. This is to manage your HR and payroll related information process under respective controls. Okay, so legislative data group, the same you can just call it as LDGs, LDG, legislative data group, your data group. So to group respect to the country or the specific organization related employee data, right? Data group means here group means group related to data. The data very specific to when you say business group also specific country or particular organization related employees. So this legislative data group you can compare with EBS. It is more or less equal to business group concept. So even if you are implementing for 10 countries, you can create only one enterprise in the Fusion environment. And by default, you can see one default enterprise. In EBS also, in fresh environment also, we can find one default business group. Okay, we can see similar one default business groups in EBS. The same way in the Fusion also, you can see one default enterprise. But in EBS, you can go ahead and you can create how many business groups you require. But in the Fusion, whatever Oracle is providing, that you can go on to update as per your requirement. So if you are going to run the business for in 10 countries, that case will be creating minimum for each country one LDG. 10 LDGs will be creating for 10 countries. And what are the controls you are setting at enterprise level, those all get defaulted to legislative data groups, and you can override as per the country specific requirements how you want to manage the employees information and the jobs and roles, jobs or positions, whatever the information you manage, map with respect to employer related data, all you can manage at legislative data groups. Okay, any question on this, please? Okay, business group is concept we have in EBS. In Fusion we have enterprise, but enterprise is not exactly equal to business group. Within the enterprise we have a legislative data groups. Those you can compare with Fusion EBS business.
Yeah, Laxman. Sorry to interrupt you in between. There's one question. So,
Clear.
you are trying to say that within the enterprise there are various legislative data groups.
Your voice is not clear. The mic which you are using is
Just a minute.
not fine.
Yeah, is it audible now?
No, same.
Yeah, so within the enterprise there are various legislative data groups that are automatically getting default from the setup of the enterprise. That is what you are trying to say?
Your voice is not clear. Please, if you can recheck your audio connection and all, please.
Lakshman, this is Srinivas Lakshman.
Yeah. Yes, must tell me.
So when you said, in the Fusion enterprise structure, you will going to have only one enterprise,
Correct.
even though like you are multiple countries. I mean, that means like if you want to implement, if you want to have a structure in multiple countries, that you mean to say that it will going to you are going to define a different enterprises for each country,
Only one enterprise.
or only under one enterprise we will going to have different legislative data groups.
Yes,
That's what you mean to say, right?
exactly, exactly.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That means, see, for one client, one client. Generally, the client will have only one enterprise. They may operate business in the multiple countries. So, based on that point, they given only one enterprise definition. But the down the line, what are the definitions you do, all those levels you can manage your country specific uh, information. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, please?
And Lakshman, I have a doubt. This is Manish.
Yeah, Manish.
In the EBS, all the HR related data are resided at business group level. So in the fusion, it will be resided at LDGs. Am I right?
Yeah, LDGs.
Okay.
LDGs
So
again will be managing the HR organization definitions and all to manage the particular department or specific uh, geography related data and all. The same logic is applicable here also.
okay. So like for multiple countries, can same LDG can be defined?
No. Country specific LDG. LDG
So
is
even the HR data is also. So even the HR data is also like bifurcated in the country wise. Am I right?
yes. For every country, you have to create separate LDG. So the HR and the payroll related, data definition in the system will be mapping with LDG.
Okay. Thank you, Lakshman.
Yeah, thanks. Any questions on this?
Lakshman, one question. Once we have defined the enterprise, we can have multiple countries, right? The multiple countries information would be automatically comes in, right? We need to choose the countries and we need to provide.
One second. When you create enterprise, no, like data won't come automatically. That is just very high level definition. There you no need to address. You are going to do the implementation for which countries. And as a separate setup, when you are creating the legislated data group, there you can go and specify. Enterprise will be in the instance level. You no need to map to the specific country.
Means it means like it is just a definition that we are defining into
That's it.
the fusion application.
Just to define.
And after that,
just definitely along with the definition will set certain controls. In enterprise level, you can specify how employee number need to be generated and which tier of models employee number generation you are going to use. They're given the different options. Okay, many controls we have at the time of enterprise definition level, but those all you can manage country specific with the legislated data group and the relevant setups.
okay, fantastic.
We'll go through that enterprise definition also, so that we will get to know what controls we have, like position related and the different flexible related controls we have. But all those you can override wherever, what level you want to have a different position structures and etc.
Fine.
Yep. Any other questions on this?
So, Lakshman,
Yeah.
what do we exactly?
I'm really sorry, same. I don't see any change. There is a lot of there is no clarity from your end. I think the speakers which you are using maybe has some problem, I guess. Yep. Fine, just go ahead. Let's see. Like if you don't have multiple questions, then we can just try in this way also. No issues. Yeah, please go ahead. I think Ashish is asking the question. Ashish, please go ahead. Let's try.
Yeah, Lakshman,
Yeah.
is it fine now?
No, not fine, but we can. I can understand. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so what exactly do we define in the legislative data group?
Okay, fine. The legislative data group primarily will be defining the definition of the legislative data group is belongs to which country, and along with that country, that will be working with association of which legal entity, and there are a lot of other information which will be setting up. We'll define it. It is not a part of our finance related configuration, but when you are going to create the user which will be using for finance purpose, it's a mandatory you have to define that legislated data group that has to be mapped with a legal entity. The legal entity need to be mapped with your user, then only the user definition is possible in Fusion. I'll take you through how to define the legislated data group at that time. If you want to understand more, definitely we can look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Fine. Done. Now the next point here is division. So when you talk about division, so in EBS, you can have a division as one of the segment within your chart of accounts. Within your chart of accounts, you can have a division concept, and the division can be some, I mean, if you are going to have a, say, some global chart of accounts, you in that scenario, within the division, you may have a different geographies as a different divisions. Or else if you are dealing with different businesses, maybe within the country or across the countries, and if your chart of account is global chart of account, in that case different vertical of businesses you can have as a different divisions. The general practices which we see is division can be represented with a particular business geography where you are running the business. Say APAC is one division, EMEA is another division. This is how you can just classify and you can have a divisions. Or else if you are dealing with a different vertical of businesses, your client is into different vertical of businesses, in that case each vertical of business, okay, each business you can maintain as a separate division. So that is a possible even for specific country chart of accounts or global chart of account. In any scenario, you can have a division concept that purely depending on your client business requirement. So what level they want to track and control the transaction, and they want to do the reporting. But in the Fusion, instead of anyway chart of account level, always you can have in EBS also. In the Fusion also, if you want to have this chart of account level, you can have. Apart from that, if you want to have a concept called as division as a part of enterprise structure, yes, that flexibility we have, where you can create the division under enterprise, and where you can the same division you can associate with your primary ledger and legal entities, finally with the BUs. That's how the mapping can be done. But if you want to generate the reporting, if you want to generate any reports division level, say for example we are creating the Fusion enterprise structure and we want to go with the division also as a part of enterprise structure. I'm not talking about chart of account structure. Enterprise structure, yes, we can create a division concept. This is a standard hierarchy. Top level enterprise, under the division, under division primary ledger, under primary ledger legal entity. This is how it goes. So I can create division, but if I create division, that will represent the hierarchy of the enterprise. And if I am going to have a division concept here, maybe that can be some sort of hierarchy maintenance, and in the different applications maybe you can manage within the project related or HR related, just reporting purpose you can use. If you want to have a financial transaction controls and reporting, everything you want to implement, whatever the division, even whatever the enterprise structure level, if you have, that is not going to be enough. That should be part of your chart of accounts only, then only you will be able to track the transactions division level. If you are going to have at enterprise level, that will be just be part of enterprise only, there won't be any use as a part of finance, and that can be used in the different other products wherever some organization hierarchy is very important in terms of reporting, in case of projects or in some other areas of application. So that's how we have a division concept in the Fusion applications. So if you want to track the reporting, if you want to track the if you want to map the transactions with the division, and if you want to do the reporting and all, you have to make sure that whatever the division you have as a part of your enterprise structure, that is there within your chart of accounts also. If you are going to have as just as a part of enterprise structure, just to represent the hierarchy in the enterprise level, that's how that can be useful. Otherwise you cannot map the financial transaction with the division concept. But within the Fusion applications, as which we are discussing about division, which is a part of enterprise structure, this is optional definition. Okay, this is a optional
So,
definition. Yeah.
Lakshman, I have one. So under division, like if you have different divisions, under the different divisions, and you're going to define the chart of accounts as per requirement, right?
Yeah, when you say chart of accounts, it's always primer ledger. It's connectivity,
Common
right?
ledger. Okay.
So I'll say like a client is operating the business within the country, that is in India, and they have a four different businesses. Okay, I'll just create four divisions, for example. And since country is the same, and they may go with the only one chart of accounts, definitely, or else business specific means a different chart of account accordingly will go with a different primary ledger. So let's take they want to go with the one chart of accounts. In that case, anyway, calendar currency would be same. If that is the case, we'll have only one primary ledger. Even if you have four divisions, under four divisions, the primary ledger mapping would be same.
Okay.
Yeah. If you
Okay.
have a business in the multiple countries, multiple geographies, say you have in the three different geographies, your business, the three different geographies you can create as three divisions. In that case, under for each division, okay, under each division you may have one or multiple primary ledgers also. Specific geography may represent multiple countries. In that case, under one geography, you can have a multiple primary ledgers which will represent specific countries, or else within specific country also you can have multiple primary ledgers. So purely depends how you are managing, what business you are doing, how many chart of accounts you are going to use. So that's how it works.
So basically, the division is here comes to the picture, and the fusion is kind of a convenience. I mean, if you want to take some advantage and you go and have multiple divisions under the same ledger or different ledger, you can define. Oh, that's the reason you said it's optional, right?
Yes, yes, that is the reason it's optional, because enterprise level division definition is optional. The reason is we have a flexibility of creating the division within the chart of account. Okay, anyway, we can anytime we can have as a one of the segment. Apart from that, they want to represent their enterprise structure, how that will be running. They can have a division also at enterprise level. Just if you are going to have enterprise level, that's not enough. The same you have to map to your chart of account. If you are operating the business, if you have a global operations, if you have a division concept, so in that case you have to make sure that you are going to have a the generally common chart of account, then directly exactly what are the division definition you have in the enterprise, that can be mapped into chart of accounts. Or else without
Okay.
taking into chart of accounts also, you can have a division concept in enterprise level. Apart from the reporting, some other aspects the division can helpful for the organization, how that some hierarchies will work, or some other uh, processes will work, and some other reporting, all those aspects that may be useful, it won't reflect in the financial transaction until unless you take as a chart of account as a one of the segment. Yep. So that's what we
Yeah,
have.
Lakshman,
Please.
I have a question, Lakshman.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So you are saying that if we create a division in the enterprise structure, it would affect our reporting.
It,
But
no,
what I have heard is,
yeah, please,
yeah,
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
what I've heard is if it is created in the chart of account as a segment, then only it will have an impact on the reporting.
I'm telling the same.
So,
Sorry, how you understood, I don't know. The same point I'm telling, I repeated twice.
okay,
The same point I was discussing, right? I was discussing the
I
same.
didn't get it. Can you
Yeah,
repeat that once?
if you are going to have a division as a part of enterprise, there is no use in terms of financial reporting. That should be part of your chart of account structure as segment, I'm telling. If you want to have just reporting and all, directly you can have as a part of chart of account structure, but to represent your enterprise structure, how it works and hierarchies and all, then you can have the division as a enterprise structure level. Only if that is limited to enterprise structure level, no use. That should be part of chart of account. I think you missed that statement. Okay, the same I am talking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Fine. Any other questions on this point, please? So no. Fine. So next, definition is primary ledger. This is same as EBS. Okay, in EBS how just primary ledger concept will work in the same way, like as a part of that we'll have a calendar, currency, chart of account, accounting method. When we are working on the system, we'll talk on that. We have some the qualifier changes, all those we have we'll discuss. And this is same as EBS in the multi-org primary ledger. Same here in the fusion also primary ledger. Your legal entity, same legal entity. Operating units, the name they changed to business unit. Business unit. This here we call as BU. Okay, in EBS, the operating unit concept we are calling as business unit. The process of definition and how we will be managing the business unit information within the system, that is slightly different when you compare with the EBS process. Okay, that we'll see in the system directly. And inventory organization concept also remains same, but the inventory in EBS will create inventory from HRMS or directly from inventory module, but in the fusion the definitions and the item creations and all they change, they move to the different product. Okay, called as a product hub. Those points we'll see when we create the inventory automation. But to understand about the enterprise structure, so these are the points we have to understand. Okay, so this is a standard hierarchy. We have enterprise, under enterprise divisions, under divisions primary ledgers, under primary ledgers LEs, and under that BUs and inventory organization. Any question on this point, please? The same I given here some graphical representation. Just I kept a slide here. So enterprise, under enterprise division, under division primary ledger, under primary ledger LE, BU under inventory organization. So enterprise is the one for one client. One client business will treat as a one enterprise. Okay, so that's how we'll have a default one as per your business and how you want to manage the controls and defaults for the respective areas of the process. You can go and do override it enterprise level. And divisions, it can be so and so geography representation or different vertical of business. Primary ledger, legal entities, and BUs and inventory organization remains same. Any question on this, please?
Laxman, just one question. In the inventory part, do we have the same concept like MIO and sub inventory?
Yes, we have like master inventory, actual inventories, and sub inventory. Yeah, same we have, because that's
Same like
see in the system to facilitate item definition we have MI master inventory, right? So the same logic they given, and to manage your inventory related information, inventory organizations for logical segregation within the inventory, sub inventories. Yes, we have everything as is, but from where we create and all that they changed. Okay,
okay.
that we'll discuss and we'll do in the system instead of touching those point in this stage. Okay, yeah, we have those as is. Any other question? Okay, when you compare like multi-org structure with enterprise structure, these are the few points you have to understand. Only enterprise level you can see as a new concept called as division, and enterprise only one we can create, rest all remain same. Fine. Okay, seems to no question. So the next point is fusion security. Okay, sorry. So when you talk about fusion security, within the fusion, what are the security we manage, that we'll just simply call as role based, okay, access control. Role based access control, we call as RBAC. Okay, the fusion, the security model we call as role based access control. Do you think this role based access control we have in EBS? Anyone?
Yes,
and no
in
AC.
hardware, role-based access control, providing the value sets, providing the access to the value sets to the users, means entering of values into the value set. There is a newly that they have established an R12.2.4, where
Okay,
we can provide the.
agree. And let's go with the previous versions. Do you have in previous versions? I'm not talking about the value set giving the grants and all. Very generic role-based access control feature. Do you have in EBS? May not be in the latest versions. Even if you take example of
Yeah,
previous versions.
providing creation of suppliers and the customers or bank definition also we can provide this access. But we have function exclusions are there, so that why that those kind of functions that we are including to the user and we are providing
This, yeah,
responsibility to the user.
that's true. You are right. So yeah, we have in ABS, but this is very limited usage we have. Okay, when you create bank account also, will make the legal entity as a owner by giving some grants or some role provisioning. The same way when you are dealing the supplier, it could be I supplier or some other areas of application, will provide some roles to the respective user from user management application, so that based on the role, okay, the so and so the object will have a relevant access within the application environment. But this functionality is purely very limited, and that generally will be applicable for web based related functions. But Fusion, the same logic they are using for everything. Okay, the Fusion applications, everything will work based on the role based access control only. Okay, so to understand more on that, what are the different type of roles we have in the Fusion, we'll see. Before we talk about Fusion, let's see what how we manage the security in EBS. In case of EBS, it can be R12 or 11, anything. So how we manage the security, the concept called as menus. We'll have a menu, right? Within the menu, you can have submenu concept. Within the submenu, we'll have a functions. Okay, so menu, submenu, and functions. If I want to access to specific application, if I need access to specific menu or submenu, what we have to do? Say I have a AP Navigate GUI 1.2 menu. Okay, I want to access to that menu to work on that. What we have to do? Can we access directly? I have a user. Okay, I have a user one. The user one need access to payables. So payables means payables menu. AP Navigate GUI 1.2. Can we connect this user to so and so menu directly?
No, it has a super user access actually. The menu that you said, it's a super user access. So we cannot give directly the entire menu access. We need to exclude some menus and functions from this.
No. I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about who is that user one. Just a user one. That's all. I'm not saying just some end user or manager. And my point is, I have one user. I have one menu called as AP Navigate GUI 1.2. Can I give the access to this user for so and so menu directly in EBS?
No,
No. How you can give?
we have to create a responsibility and then assign
That's it.
that
That's it.
responsibility to
Yeah,
the.
done. That is the point I'm looking for. See, that's what we do. We cannot give any access to user directly. What we'll do is we'll create the responsibility. Okay, I'll create the say AP responsibility, for example. I'll create the AP responsibility. Now I'll assign this AP responsibility. See, just by selecting the menu called as AP Navigate GUI, I'm creating one responsibility. This responsibility I'll be assigning to this user. Do you think that user will be able to work on AP responsibility?
No, we need to provide the application name over there.
No.
Then
Simple point. I am saying responsibility is created. Responsibility created means definitely we should give all those, since those are mandatory, right? So that means we given.
yes.
We given everything. I selected say application name,
Now you can.
everything. Application responsibility is ready. I created with the required information. I given the data group and request group also. Of course, request group you can ignore, optional. So whatever mandatory, I given proper information and I created. Now I have responsibility ready. I'll assign this responsibility to this user. Do you think the user will be able to work on the responsibility?
No, we need to provide some profile options for that particular responsibility.
Means
Profile options, HR group, HR business group, or a security profile, MO security profile that we need to provide. And only that user will be able to work on this particular responsibility.
yeah, the exact point is so that responsibility we have to associate with the so and so operating unit and primary ledger. Okay, yes, the other points also correct. BZ and HR user type profile options, those all will be mapping. But simple point is, so when this user is going to work on this AP responsibility, AP is specific to operating unit, OU specific application. So you have to specify the user when this user is going to work on this responsibility. The user can have access to which operating unit. That means you have to assign, right? You have to assign operating unit to that responsibility, as well as there should be primary ledger association also with that responsibility. So the user will have access to so and so operating unit related data and so and so primary ledger related data. This responsibility will provide access to so and so forms. Then that user can work on accounts payables responsibility functions for specific operating unit. We don't need to talk about primary ledger here, just for connectivity we use for specific operating unit. That means when you talk about anyway, by default primary ledger should be there everywhere to record any accounting related information. So I'm not taking that as primary, that would be there. Okay, so if you want to work on AP responsibility, you have to map this operating unit to that responsible, then only you will be able to record the transaction for specific operating unit. So this mapping is required. Okay, this mapping is required. If you are going to have a just responsibility, no use. Okay, if you are going to have a just responsibility, you cannot do anything with that responsibility. You may assign to that user, but user cannot work on that responsibility. If you have responsibility, okay, to that responsibility you have to assign so and so operating it. If it is GL responsibility, you have to assign minimum primary ledger. Okay, so this is how we deal in the EBS. When you talk about fusion applications, so let's talk similar points. The similar logics how we'll manage in the EBS, that is how we have in the fusion applications. In fusion applications, primarily we have four type of roles. So these are the primary roles which generally we come across. For the same roles, we have a different naming convention also. We'll discuss on those points when we are working on some custom roles definition in our application. We have a four type of roles. Say job role and duty role, say data role, and other one is abstract role. Okay, we have four type of roles. So in EBS we have a menu. Within the menu we have a submenu. Within the submenus we have a functions. So if you want to have access to entire menu or submenu or specific functions, what we'll do is we have to create response. Menu means directly we'll select. If you need access to so and so submenu, you may create custom menu. Within that you'll select submenu, and by using that menu custom menu you'll create response. If you need access to so and so functions, yes, we'll create the custom menu. Within that we'll list those functions. Those will be selecting at the time of responsibility creation. Whatever you want to get access, you'll create responsibility that will be mapping with the so and so operating. That depending on which responsibility you are using, you'll be mapping with the specific data. You can call OU is specific data, GL is specific data, okay, or inventory is specific data. Okay, so this is how we'll deal. So when you compare these roles with the EBS, how these are relevant. So job role, job role is equal to menu only. In EBS, what we are calling as menu, that concept they given in Fusion as job role. That's all. Okay. And duty role is equal to, here within the menu we'll have a sub menus. So here we have a duty role. The duty role concept is equal to sub menu. And data role, here we have menu, sub menu, function, AP responsibility, and AP responsibility, which is mapped with the operating net. This combination in EBS, if you have particular responsibility which is mapped with the operating net or general ledger, then only you can start working on the transaction process. The same if you want to do in the Fusion applications, you should have a data role. So data role is equal to, as per EBS, particular responsibility plus OU and primary ledger or responsibility plus primary ledger. Anything you can take, that purely depending on for which application responsibility that is. Abstract role means it's not specific, it is very generic role. The best example for abstract role is employee. We'll understand on this. Just take the point. Abstract role is the employee role we call as abstract role. So this is what we have to understand in Fusion applications. So we have 4 type of roles: job roles, duty roles, data roles, abstract roles. Job roles are equal to menus in EBS. The menu concept only they introduced in the Fusion as job roles. EBS submenu concept they introduced as a duty roles. EBS responsibility, which is mapped with the primary ledger operating net. That combination they introduced in Fusion as a data roles. And this is the other role is abstract role. A purpose of all we'll be discussing, where they will use certain users need access to that role also, that we'll discuss more detail level. Anyway, we'll be working on it. But for now, just abstract role, just take an example as a employee. That's all. So these are the points we have to understand. Okay. So based on these few points, any question, please? You can post your questions. Any questions on this? Fine, no questions. The other point is, so Oracle delivering all the job roles, duty roles, okay, and even abstract roles also Oracle is providing. So apart from that, as per your business requirement or user requirement related to business, you can create your own job roles. I mean to say custom. Here in EBS, we can create our custom menus and custom sub menus, right, and custom responsibilities. In the same way, in the Fusion also, you can create custom job roles and custom duty roles and custom abstract roles you can create. But generally, data roles created by system automatically. Data role system will create automatically. When system will create the data role, if you create the operating net and if you do the operating units some specifications that will be discussing, basically that we call as the business unit business functions. Just let's take very high level when we will see in the system and we will discuss more detail level. So when system will create the data roles, when you create the primary ledger, system will create GL related data roles automatically. When you create the operating unit, in Fusion we are calling as BU, right? When you create the business unit BU, then system will create the data roles. So what are the roles we require? Generally system will create, which we call as data roles, but we have a flexibility, we can create our own data roles also within the system. That means these are all type of roles we can create, but normally these all are predefined: job, duty, and abstract. If you have a requirement, you can create, otherwise you can use whatever Oracle is providing. And coming to data roles will be created based on the setups you do in the system, when you create operating unit or primary ledger or inventory organization, based on these definitions are in fixed assets, corporate book, tax book. When you create these definitions, generally in EBS, which will be mapping with our responsibilities. Okay, relevant or few cases may not be mapped in EBS with the responsibility. Those kind of definitions also can be generated as a data roles in the Fusion applications. And if you want to create the data roles, yes, through manual process also you can create. Okay, so just these are the points you have to understand. The general process, if you want to, if you will create the user and will be assigning the data roles to the user. Okay, so in EBS what we do, we'll create responsibility, we'll assign this responsibility, we'll assign that, say for example operating unit to responsibility, then that responsibility will be assigning to the user, right? We create responsibility, we'll assign operating unit to responsibility, that responsibility will assign to the user. The similar way in Fusion we'll assign the data roles to user. Okay, in EBS we assign responsibility to user, in Fusion we assign the data roles to the user. So this is what we have to understand. Any question on this, please? Any questions? Fine, no questions on this. Fine. So the other point here is Fusion users. Okay, Fusion users. So let's talk about few points on this. So when you talk about EBS, what we do is we'll create the user in sysadmin, system administrator, responsibility or say application. The system administrator application will create the users and we can assign the employee to user. We can assign the employee to user. But when you talk about users, there is no the primary classification for that user. Any user you can create from system administrator. If you need employee assignment, yes, you can assign the employee to the user. Otherwise, straight away you can use that user. But in the Fusion applications, what are the users we use? Those are classified into two types. Okay, Fusion application we have a two type of users. The first one is implementation user or implementation consultant user. Okay, we create user for implementation consultant. Other user is, I'll just, instead of calling as consultant, let's call it as implementation user. This is how normally we use. Okay, implementation user. Other user type is employee user. Okay, in Fusion applications, when you talk about the users, we have two type of users: implementation user and employee user. Okay, we'll look into the difference and all. But first point is from where we can create the implementation user. Implementation user you can create from IDM application. IDM stands for Identity Manager or OAM. Which is a middleware component. Or the same you can call as OAM as we discussed in yesterday's session. OAM stands for Oracle Identity Manager. Okay. In the Fusion we have two type of users: implementation user and employee user. The implementation user you can create from IDM or call it as OAM, Identity Manager or Oracle Identity Manager. And from where we can create the employee user. So employee user we can create from HCM. HCM stands for Human Capital Management. So product family for HR, payroll, options management, talent management, many other HR related applications, time and labor, all those applications will be part of HCM. Okay. So implementation user you can create from IDM, employee user you can create from HCM application. So what does it mean by implementation user creation? Here implementation user means just user. Here employee user means user with employee assignment. Okay. In EBS, when you create user from system administrator responsibility or application, for any user you can assign the employee. That is possible. But in the Fusion, if you create the user from IDM, you cannot assign employee. You cannot assign employee to that user. Only you can map the employee with the user if that user is created from HCM application. Okay, HCM application. So any question here, please? We'll discuss how these two will be working in the system. But based on this point, any question, please? Okay, no question. Fine. Okay. So in EBS, if you want to start with the implementation, which responsibility we require? If you want to start with the implementation, system administrator responsibility. So within the system administrator responsibility, we'll have the relevant menu. The menu will give the access to go and create the responsibilities and to set the profile options. The same way in the Fusion, we don't have any concept called responsibility. Here we have a roles. Say for example, you have one user employee, one consultant called as ABC consultant. So this consultant is going to do the implementation. So for this consultant, which roles we have to assign? I'll say consultant 1. Okay, we have one consultant who has to do the implementation. So in case of EBS, if there is any consultant, you may create user and you will be assigning the system administrator responsible to that user, or else user can log into the instance as sysadmin user and they'll have access to the sysadmin responsibility and other response. They can start to do working on system configuration. But in the Fusion, say you have one user called as consultant 1 and you want to allow that user, a consultant, to do the system related configuration. Now which roles we have to assign to this user? Let's call it as user, consultant only. Let's call it as user. Okay, so the roles are application,
job roles,
implementation. We'll talk
job roles and duty roles.
No, we'll talk on that. Just let me give you that list, then definitely we should compare for better understanding. Okay, application implementation, consultant, and IT security manager and employee role. Okay, so we want, and we have to give these roles to the consultant 1. When you say consultant, nothing but implementation user. That means this user first will create from IDM. When you say implementation user, so consultant definitely implementation you will be creating as implementation user only. Okay, from IDM will create one user. User name is consultant 1. For that user, we have to assign these 3 roles. And in EBS, when you are doing the setups, we'll be using the system administrator responsibility, right? So do you assign anything to system administrator responsibility? Primary ledger or operating unit or business group or anything? Do we assign any definitions to system administrator responsibility?
No, we don't assign any of
We
the
don't assign. The reason?
It is a standalone responsibility so that we can do the configuration
Yes.
for
We are
implementation.
not going to record the transactions for specific primary ledger or operating units. Just for configuration purpose we use it. So no mapping is required. So here, as we discussed here, if you have a responsibility without any mapping, that is equal to which role? As per fusion. No, so you have a just responsibility. Within that you have a menu only. That you can compare with a job role. Okay. Job role is equal to menu only. Even if you are going to keep that menu within the responsibility, just for access purpose you are keeping within the responsibility, this responsibility without operating it or primary ledger mapping also you can compare with the job role. So that means here you have a role where you are not going to map anything. So if you have any role without mapping anything, that you can call as a job role. That means these roles are equal to menus, that's all. These all we call as job roles. And similar to application implementation consultant role is equal to system administrator responsibility in EBS. Okay. With application implementation, if you assign the application implementation consultant role to any user, the user can do the system configuration. The user can do the system configuration. Say you have access to system administrator responsibility in EBS. Can you create new user? If you
Yes,
have,
we can.
yes, we can. But in the fusion, even if you have access to this application implementation consultant role, you cannot create the new user. Say we have a consultant 1. We want to allow the consultant 1 to create the new users. For that purpose, we assign IT security manager role to this consultant. Not only for that reason, if you assign IT security manager role to any user, the user will get the privileges to create the new user, and that user can create the custom roles. The IT security manager will allow the user to create the custom roles. This role will be useful to do the configuration. System configuration.
So Lakshman,
Please. Yeah, please go ahead.
yeah, I have one question here. So this is
Please go ahead.
this is nothing but it's going to be an additional step which, I mean, if you wanted to give a privilege to create a user to that consultant, we need to create a role for him as a IT security manager.
No need to
Right.
create. We have to assign. These are seeded roles.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to assign that it's a responsibility
Yes.
to that consultant.
Yep. So like this is equal to system administrator responsibility. With the system administrator responsibility, we can complete all the configuration right from the scratch. Responsibility
Okay.
the similar way, if you assign this application implementation consultant role to any user, you can do the system configuration within the fusion. Any application related setups you can do. And if you assign IT security manager role to the user, that role will allow that so and so respective user to create the additional users, new users, as well as this role only will give the provision to the so and so user to which user you are assigning to create the custom roles. And in EBS, if you have, say for example, you have access to payable super user responsibility. If you have access to payable super user responsibility, can you access SRS window or not?
Yes.
For example, I'll go and remove request group from the responsibility. Still, can you access to SRS window or not? My point is SRS window just.
Yes, I mean request group is
Yes, correct.
specifically to run a
No, no,
concurrent
no.
program. So
We are not going in detail in that. Just simple point. You may have request group, may not have
yeah,
request group. Okay, within the since that is optional, SRS window access will get since we have access to
yes,
responsibility. If you have a request group, you can submit the reports and
that's
programs. Otherwise, just at least you can navigate. That will be blank. That means
right. Yeah,
if you assign the responsibility to the user, you will have access to the SRS window. Any responsibility, you take any responsibility, you will have a access to SRS window. So in EBS, we are calling as SRS, right? SRS, Standard Request Submission Window. The same SRS function in Fusion we call as ESS job. ESS. That is a page generally. This is a window we call as, that is SRS. Let's ignore that window or page, all those things not required. SRS. SRS means standard request submission. Here ESS means enterprise scheduler service. Okay, the SRS window. Okay, here we call as, will be submitting from ESS page. Normally we call as, okay, through SRS window what we can submit request. Here the request we are calling as a job. Okay, EBS we are calling as request or request set. The same request and request set here in EBS Fusion we are calling as job or job set. So you can submit any report or program from ESS job page. Okay, now in EBS, if you assign any responsibility, the user can have access to SRS window. But in the Fusion, if you want to have access to this ESS job related page, you should assign employee role to that user. Otherwise, you cannot have access to that page to submit any report or request. That is the reason we have to assign ESS employee role also to the user. Any question on this, please? Okay, fine, done. So this is what we have to understand when you create implementation, any user for implementation purpose, you have to primarily have to assign these three roles: application implementation consultant, IT security manager, employee. Once you're done with all the setups, based on the setup, system will create the data rows. Then you will create the actual users. You may create AP user, and you can assign AP related data roles to the user. That we'll see at very detailed level, but this is a simple point we have to understand. And other point we discussed, the user is implementation user. Okay, you cannot map the employee. In case of employee user, yes, there will be employee association with the user plus employee. Employee user means user plus employee. Implementation user means just user. In the system environment, how these two makes the difference. Say for example, I have an implementation user. I'm calling as implementation user, which is created from, say, this is created from IDM. I'll take simple example here. I have, say, user 1 and user 2. Say user 1 I created from IDM. Sorry, user 1 I created from IDM and user 2 I created from HCM. So user 1 we call as implementation user. The reason from where it is created from IDM. whatever the user you create from IDM, that we call as implementation user. And user 2 we created from HCM. If you create user from HCM, that user you can call as employee user. Okay. Now say, by using user 1, I completed all the setups. Okay, you can complete any setups by using the user 1. The user 1 is IDM user, implementation user, but you cannot, by using the user 1, we cannot create the supplier sites. By using the user 1, you cannot create the supplier sites. That means by using implementation user, you cannot create the supplier site. The supplier sites only you can create if your user is created from HCM, means employee user. Here we can create the supplier site. HCM user means real user, employee. So for employee only they are giving the provision to create the supplier sites. So implementation user you cannot create, but if that is the case, why we are creating the implementation user first, and why we have to create implementation user directly? You may create HCM user. The reason is, when you are doing the fresh implementation, if you want to create HCM user, you need legal entity for HCM user creation. For HCM, if you want to create HCM user, nothing but employee user, which user allows to define the supplier sites. If you want to create that, we need legal entity and business unit. Do you think LE and BU will be ready when you start with the fresh implementation? No. So that is the reason, to start with our implementation, all the time we'll create the what I can say, implementation user will be creating from IDM. Then we'll do all the setups. Once we are ready with the legal entity and business unit, then we'll go and create the HCM user. Then you can complete the rest of setups like supplier sites creation and the rest of all. So this is a point we have to understand. In our classes also, first we'll be creating the IDM user and we'll start doing the implementation. And once we are ready with the legal entity and business unit, then we'll create the HCM user, and we can assign all these roles to HCM user, so that these all roles will give these different privileges. Along with that, the additional privileges you can get from HCM user is supplier site creation. That means if you assign these roles to implementation user, except supplier site definition, you can do all the setups. But the same roles, if you are going to assign to HCM user, along with these privileges, you will have access to supplier definition function also. So this is what we have to understand when you talk about the users in Fusion applications. If you have any question on this, please. Any questions, please?
Yeah, Lakshman, can you specify what kind of task we can perform using the implementation user, like
Any task, as a
giving
consultant,
an
what setups will do in ABS? Take simple example, payables. You can set up financial options, payable options, payment terms, distribution sets, banks definition. If you say, take example of receivables, say auto accounting setup, transaction type, transaction sources. Okay, setups, configuration, which we do one time, all.
okay, for ledger definitions we are using something different, like some
Same
different
ledger
role, or
option
how it
setup
is?
only, right? Calendar, primary ledgers, legal entity, all same setups. All you can do from implementation user. Any setup except supplier sites respect to finance.
So you mean to say we can create business groups and ledgers or inventory orgs, so all these setups can be configured?
Yes, everything you can do. Business group concept we don't have here. The relevant enterprise, all we can create.
Oh, enterprise, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, okay,
yeah,
thank you.
everything you can define. Any other questions? Okay.
Lakshman,
Yeah.
so basically, if we look at the difference between the IDM user and SCM user, so in a simple words, I mean, we can assume that user will create it through HCM. I mean, will have more privileges than IDM. That's how we can interpret
Correct,
it,
correct,
right?
correct. But more privileges means reality, not those many more and all. Just one additional privilege you can see with respect to finance. That's it. Not many. All privileges IDM user can have except supplier side with respect to finance. Yeah, your definition is correct, but just I'm specifying that.
Okay. So
Yep.
usually, like in the reality, like why, like usually why we will go for a IDM user than a kind of HCM user? And
The
basically, is there
same I
any
explained,
major?
right? Same I explained just now. When you are doing the
Right.
first implementation, okay, if you go with a demo instance or vision instance, you can have some sample definitions as like LEs and business units, right? But in the
Right. Yeah.
fresh implementation, fresh instance, do you see some sample data like LEs and BUs? No,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
No,
Uh,
you cannot see. Fresh instance, you cannot
Oh.
see sample data, right? Some
Oh.
sample
Uh,
demo legal entity, demo BUs, or some vision BU, vision LE, you cannot see. Okay.
okay. Okay. Okay. In that.
At,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, at the time of HCM user definition, legal entry and business units are mandatory. Okay.
Okay.
So if I'm trying to create HCM user in the fresh instance, you don't find any legal entity or any BU. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It shows blank, right? So you cannot.
Okay.
That is the
Okay.
reason we start with the IDM user and we get ready with whatever the definitions required. Then whenever we find the time our LE and BUs are ready, then we'll switch to HCM user that will have all the privileges.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Mm.
Any other
Okay.
question?
Lakshman, got it.
Yeah.
Lakshman, this is Akash.
Yeah, please.
Lakshman, in the HCM user 2, once we have defined this, sorry, in the IDM user, we will not be able to create, sorry, in the HCM user itself, means it is created from HCM itself. We need to enable this user with the employee. Once we have defined the employee, then only we will be able to do it.
While you are creating employee, you will have an option whether against this employee do you need user or not.
Yes.
If you give the user name, then that user with that employee association user will be created. Once user is created HCM user, that will be available in IDM only. From IDM only you can assign these roles. And you can set the password and rest of
Correct.
user management we do from IDM.
No. My question is, through HCM user 2, without defining or without assigning an employee, can we create a supplier site?
No. See, it's not like separate step. There won't be any step to assign. The definition itself will sync with that. When you say HCM,
Okay.
nothing but you will create the basic definition of employee. Within that employee definition,
Usually what happens,
that user need access, whether that employee need user or not will be, if user required, username will give. Then only that user will become employee user. If you don't give any username within that employee creation, that is just employee only without any user definition.
correct. See,
Yeah.
what happens in R2L usually,
Yeah,
what we do.
same we discussed. We'll create user separately and we'll be creating the employee in HRMS that will be assigning. That process we don't have in Fusion.
Right. Here also in Artwell also we have an option that create yourself as a buyer. As and when I create an employee, after that I can assign a role to that employee as a buyer. Then only we can do the purchase order and all those things. The same way in the HCM user also we can do the same.
No, no,
Once we enable this employee,
no, no,
and then we can create the supplier and
no,
suppliers
no.
sites
See,
and all.
you can see simple point. You can create user as IDM. You can assign employee role to IDM, but still this user cannot act as an employee user. And you can create, when you create HCM user, when you are creating the HCM user, that means that that is nothing but user plus employee. That's how system will create. Okay, there is no additional assignment possible. That's it, simple point. Okay, by adding something you cannot privilege
Okay,
that
fine.
user as some with additional privileges or HCM user and all. Yep.
Okay, understood.
Yep.
Lakshman, so what kind of roles are assigned to HCM users? So means we'll be seeing it or means how it is?
Yeah, definitely. See, HCM user, nothing but normally employee user we call, yeah. So say for example, I'll create the user user, say employee, normally employee user. So which roles we have to assign? The employee will be working for which department and what is the responsibility, what is the role within the company the user is going to work, the relevant roles will be assigning. So I created one user called as employee called as ABC employee. The ABC employee is going to work for payables. So I'll be assigning the payables related roles. And receivables employee, yes, receivables related roles. The user will be working on which process the relevant roles will be assigning. Okay. Any other questions?
Unless and until we will not be able to see the Fusion application, no, will not clarify this.
Yeah, that's true.
That is
That's
what
true.
I'm saying.
Directly, if you see, that's a different thing. That is the reason I want to give you some level of understanding with our discussion. Then it will be very easy. What we are going to do, what we are trying to do, it will be a little bit known for us. But of course, that's true. You cannot get 100% understanding with this discussion.
So, Laxman, are there separate roles for the implementation and for the user management, like creation of invoices and creation of
Correct. Yes.
in receivables?
Yeah. For implementation consultant, these are the roles we use. And for transaction process, invoice creation, payment creation, billing, receipt, for that we have a separate roles. Those roles we call as data roles.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So in EBS, if you go to payables, you can do the setups, payable setups, and you can work on the payables transaction process once you are ready with the setups. But in the Fusion, that is separated. Any setups you can do in the system with the help of this application implementation consultant role. And if you want to work on any process, you have to assign additional data roles to the user. The data role only will give you the access to so and so function access to record the transactions. That's any other question, please? Fine. Fine. If no question, we can wind up the session for today.